Before you dislike this video, because I know some people will see this caption and just feel the need to immediately dislike it, maybe listen. Maybe listen for a second. I don't know. Just like think about listening or something. I feel like this is really important and helpful information that I think everyone who's trans, or maybe honestly who isn't trans, should hear, because yeah, I just think that highly about this video. So this video is about the fact that you don't need dysphoria to be trans. The things I hope to cover in this video are the definition of the term trans, why you might not be dysphoric but also be trans, and why thinking that you need dysphoria to be trans is harmful to the trans community, which I'm assuming many people watching this, if anyone watches this, is a part of. So like, you don't want that. You don't want to hurt the trans community, because then you're hurting yourself. So I have my phone here. This is the dictionary.com app, and I'm gonna look up the word transgender. Okay. So the first definition is noting or relating to a person whose gender identity does not correspond to that person's biological sex assigned at birth. 2. Noting or relating to a person who does not conform to societal norms or roles. That one's like a little more like, but let me go over that just briefly. So this definition suggests that being transgender, or trans, means that you do not identify with the sex/gender that you were assigned at birth. Did you hear dysphoria in that definition? Me neither. Wow, we have so much in common. That's not in the definition. You know why? Because transness is not defined by dysphoria. It's a state of being that has nothing to do with how much pain you're in as a result of being it. So like, trans and dysphoria are things that often interact with each other, but they are not the same thing. I'm gonna go through some reasons that you might be trans and not have dysphoria. So a lot of people think about dysphoria as either bodily or social. So I'm going to go through some reasons you might not have either of those things. I'm going to start with body-related dysphoria. Let's start with genetics. So a lot of people think of dysphoria being that, like, if you're assigned female at birth, you feel dysphoric about the fact that your body is like female, maybe feminine in some nature, stuff like that. The thing is, we all have different bodies. We all have different genetics. And some people are born into bodies that, surprisingly, they feel comfortable in. So let me give you an example. So if you've ever watched the YouTuber Cat Black, she's a trans woman on YouTube, really cool, really great, just lovely human. She talks a lot about how when she was born and she grew up, you know, she was assigned male at birth, but, like, her body developed in a lot of ways, even though she was assigned male at birth, that were, like, had feminine nature to them. I don't know how to say that better. Like, she talks about, like, how, like, she had hips and breasts before she started estrogen. So, like, without hormones, her body had certain characteristics that one would associate with, like, being a woman. Does that mean she didn't have dysphoria? Maybe not. But for someone, that could be like a huge saving grace, and that could make them not feel dysphoric about their body, because their body might already feel like it connects to how they identify. I have a really good friend who is trans. He's a trans guy, and he has really broad shoulders. As a result, he does not feel dysphoric about his shoulders. And there are, like, countless examples of, like, everyone's body is different. Everyone's body, like, looks different. Intersex bodies are a really good example of this. Some people are assigned a certain gender at birth, but are also have some intersex condition, which might make their body look a certain way that might make them feel really connected to the gender that they identify with. Also, a lot of people transition. They go on hormones, they might get surgeries, and these things might make dysphoria go away. But they're still trans, though. Them doing these things does not make them stop being trans. Do you understand? It's like trans does not equal dysphoria. A lot of people, when they transition, might want to separate themselves from the trans community because they want to be stealth, but that doesn't mean they're not trans. They still identify as a gender that is different from the gender they were assigned at birth, which is the definition of transgender. Another thing I want to talk about is, like, some people just have other shit to worry about. That sounds silly, but, like, you might just have other shit that you're dealing with in your life, like racism or like poverty. And these things might take away the mental energy that you might have being dysphoric and put them into other things you're dealing with. So, like, you might not be, like, dysphoria might not be, like, the first or even the 10th thing on your mind. Another thing, there's a range of different brain experiences. Neurodivergence and, like, mental illness is something that's pretty rampant in the trans community. Most trans people I know have anxiety and depression. So, like, a lot of the way your brain is working can affect how you relate to your body and, like, how you relate to your gender. So, like, a really big example is dissociation. Dissociation is when you basically feel like you don't exist in your body. It's something that happens to me. I am a trans person with mental illness. It's something that happens to a lot of people who are trans and also have mental illnesses. The thing is, if you feel like you don't exist in your body, then, like, you might not have body dysphoria because you don't feel like you're in your body, so how could you, you know? Do you get what I'm saying? So, like, that was the thing that happened to me a lot throughout my life. When I was dissociating, I did not exist in my body. Like, I didn't feel like I existed in my body. So I didn't feel body dysphoria because I didn't, like, relate in any way to my body. Because I did not, like, it was just, like, they were, like, my brain was over here and my body was here. There are just, like, trans people of all different brain type experiences. That can also relate to social dysphoria. Like, if you're dissociating, you might not, like, be able to, like, register what people are saying to you or how people are referring to you. Also, some people are privileged enough to live around people who use their pronouns and who refer to them with a name that they like. Speaking of names, some people don't have gendered names. Like, there are names that are unisex, that aren't necessarily associatable with any particular gender. Or some people might not, like, associate gender with their name. These are things in the world. The, like, bottom line of this is that, like, dysphoria for people can, like, fluctuate majorly for, like, countless reasons. Defining transness by dysphoria doesn't make any sense at all. Because, like, if I don't feel dysphoric for a second, does that make me not trans? See, that doesn't make sense. Because, like, I'm still trans. Because I don't identify with the gender that I was assigned at birth. That's what trans means. I'm gonna say that throughout the video, because I think people need to be reminded, just like a little bit. Now that we've talked about the countless, I don't even feel like I've touched on everything, but these are just, like, some of the reasons why you might not experience dysphoria. I'm sure there are others. Feel free to list them in the comments. Reasons that this is harmful. And by this, I mean defining transness as a whole by dysphoria. This is a method of what's called gatekeeping. Gatekeeping is when often, like, a marginalized community has some way of, like, defining the group that, like, keeps a lot of people who might fit in the group out. That's what this is doing. Because, see, there are a lot of people who don't identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, who also might not consistently experience dysphoria. By saying that they are not trans, you're denying them resources that might be really helpful for them to, like, be happy, or to just, like, live their lives more positively. You're denying them of community, which is, like, a really, really big thing for a lot of trans people, is finding other people who they can talk to about not being cis. You're denying them of your respect and your love and, like, your shared kinship. By saying that you need to have dysphoria to be trans, there are a lot of assumptions behind that phrase. One of them is that our community is a monolith, that everyone who is trans is the same or has a really similar experience. newsflash, that's not true. We have so many different kinds of people in our community, and that's a really beautiful thing. There are trans people of different race experiences, of different socioeconomic experiences, who have different nationalities, who have different religions, who have all of the, who are binary, or maybe they're not binary. It goes on and on and on and on. There's so many different kinds of trans people. These trans people might not need the same things as you do. By saying that you need dysphoria to be trans, we're making this assumption that all trans people need and want the same things and are basically a monolith, and we're not. So that's stupid. Don't do that. Thinking of dysphoria as like what defines transness is very like assimilationist in nature. And the reason that this is very assimilationist is that if we assume that all trans people have dysphoria, if we treat transness like a medical condition, then we assume everyone's getting treated and that eventually they'll just like become the same as cis people ultimately. And that's kind of fucked up because like not everyone wants to do that. I personally don't feel like I need to assimilate to cisness. That's something that I've been taught, but that's not necessarily something I want. I actually really enjoy living around a lot of queer and trans people, and like a lot of other people do. You might want to hang out with a lot of cis people, and that's also okay, but don't assume that I and every other trans people want that, because that's not true. Some people think of transness, transgenderism, whatever you call it, as a medical condition, and that's fine. If you think that you need to be cured by taking medication, by having surgery, if you think that will cure you, that's okay. But that's not how everyone else thinks. And by forcing other people to think like this, you're just like denying their experience and just like kicking them out of your club. And again, denying them resources just because they have a different experience than you. And that's shitty. I don't know everything that defines community, but I certainly know that part of a community is that there are a lot of people who are gonna be different from you. And you have to fucking deal with that and stop being an asshole. Sorry, I got a little aggressive there. But honestly, this irks me a lot, because I think it's really fucking stupid, and it was something that kept me from accepting myself as a trans person, because I didn't feel super dysphoric all the time, so I was like, I must not be trans. But guess what? I am trans. Discovering I was trans was really important for me and my happiness. I'm gonna stop here. I could say a lot more things. I have a lot more to say about this, but this is like, these are the main points I want to make. A part of me was making this video for people who talk shit about trans people who don't have dysphoria or who don't have constant dysphoria, but I think really the point of me making this video is for people who are questioning their gender, who might not feel like they're trans enough to be trans, and I just want to be like, no, you are trans. If you don't feel like you are the gender that you were assigned at birth, then, like, you can identify as trans. And people who tell you otherwise are assholes. Sorry. That's just how I feel. I feel like you're mean. Feel free to comment or not, or like this video. You could dislike if you really want to. But yeah, that's what I had to say. So, hang loose.